Desperation. Enslaved for 17 years, sentenced to burn at dawn until a rogue alpha saw her true power. The first light of dawn crept slowly over the jagged mountains, casting a pale gold glow across the kingdom's capital. Desperation. From the high towers of the palace, the city below looked calm, almost peaceful. But in the courtyard, the air was thick with tension, fear, and the faint scent of smoke. Desperation. Alara knelt on the cold stone, her wrists bound in iron chains that bit into her skin. 17 years.
17 years of servitude, of obedience, forced through pain and silence. She had long stopped counting the days.
They had all blurred together, one long stretch of shadows and harsh voices. Her hair, once dark and flowing, hung matted over her shoulders. Her clothes were ragged, her body thin from years of neglect. Yet, in her eyes, a spark remained, faint, almost invisible, but burning all the same. The guards stood in rigid rows, torches flickering in their hands, illuminating the path that led to the pyre. The smell of dry wood and smoke reached Alara before the fire itself. The kingdom's executioners had come for her, for a crime she had never committed. The queen had pronounced her guilty simply because of her bloodline, a line cursed long ago, said to carry a power that could tip the scales of kingdoms. Alara shivered, not from the cold, but from the knowledge that this would be the last sunrise she would see. She lowered her gaze, trying to summon the courage to face the flames. Memories of her childhood rose unbidden. Her mother's whispered warnings, the cruel laughter of her captors, the empty nights spent dreaming of freedom. She had survived so long in silence, and yet it seemed all would end here before the sun even rose fully. A sudden movement drew her attention. From the shadows at the edge of the courtyard, a figure emerged. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with a quiet power that seemed almost unnatural. He was a stranger, or perhaps a rumor made flesh, the rogue alpha the villagers whispered about in fear. The man who walked alone beyond the kingdom's borders. His dark hair fell loosely over his forehead, and his eyes the color of storm clouds, fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. The guards tensed. Who approaches? One demanded. I do, the man said, his voice calm but firm. Step aside. Laughter, sharp and scornful, echoed through the courtyard. Do you think you can stop this? She is to be burned at dawn. Nothing can change that. The rogue alpha ignored them. With a single motion, faster than any human should be able to move, he crossed the distance between them. The guards drew their swords, but he did not falter. In a blur of movement, he disarmed two of them and sent them sprawling to the ground. The crowd gasped. Elara's heart pounded, a mix of fear and awe. He reached her side and knelt slightly, studying her face. Elara, he said softly, as if speaking her name could protect her from the flames. You have more power than they know. I can see it. She flinched. No one had ever said that before. Not in all the years of punishment, not in all the hours of forced silence. I'm nothing, she whispered, her voice breaking. I am just a slave. You are not nothing. You are stronger than this kingdom, stronger than their fear. Come with me if you want to live. The fire flickered behind her, and the heat on her face reminded her that time was running out. For the first time in years, Elara felt a choice, to stay and die, or to follow the stranger into the unknown. She rose slowly, her chains clinking. The Alpha extended a hand, and she hesitated. Bear, his eyes held no threat, only a promise of survival, and something deeper, something she could not name. Finally, she took his hand. The moment her fingers touched his, a strange warmth surged through her body. It was not just heat, but a pulse of energy, of life that had been dormant for years. Berisher. Her chains did not break, but they seemed lighter somehow, as if the fire had been held at bay by the very force she had never understood in herself. "Hold on!" he said, and with another swift movement he shattered the iron bindings around her wrists. The clatter of falling metal echoed like a bell across the courtyard. The guards cried out, but before they could react, he had pulled her into the shadows beyond the pyre. Beration. For several heartbeats they ran together, the city fading behind them. Alara's lungs burned, but adrenaline and disbelief drove her forward. Pair. She did not look back. The sound of the flames licking at the pyre receded into the distance, replaced by the wind whistling through narrow alleyways and over crumbling rooftops. Berate. Finally they slowed, emerging into a forest at the edge of the kingdom. Mist clung to the trees and the forest seemed alive, watching them with a quiet patience. The rogue Alpha let her go, studying her closely. "You survived," he said simply. Elora sank to the ground, trembling. I, Burse. I don't understand. Why, Beration? Why did you save me? Because you are not meant to die here, he replied. Not yet.
You have a power that even the Queen fears, and I
have my own reasons for keeping you alive. She looked at him, searching his face.
Beration. There was a shadow there, a pain she could not name, but also a fierce determination.
Your reasons, are they your own or mine? He gave a faint smile, almost sad.
Beration. Perhaps both. But that will depend on you.
If you choose to stay with me, you will learn things you could not even imagine. You will learn to stand, to fight, to use the strength that is already inside you.
Beret.
If you refuse, you will die tomorrow anyway. Elara felt a flicker of something she had not felt in years. Hope.
Fragile. Trembling. But real. She took a deep breath, the cool forest air filling her lungs. For the first time in 17 years, she could decide her own fate. Die from the spectrum down. I will stay, she said. The rogue Alpha nodded, his eyes softening for just a moment before returning to their usual stormy intensity.
Good, but know this. Survival will not be easy.
You will be tested. You will face darkness.
And sometimes the darkness will come from me. Elara did not flinch. Somehow she trusted him, though she did not understand why. She had trusted no one for so long, yet this man, the one the kingdom whispered about in fear, seemed the only one who saw her not as a curse, but as something more. As the first true light of dawn broke over the forest canopy, casting silver shadows on the ground, Elara felt the shift inside her. Chains of fear and years of oppression were breaking, not entirely, but enough for her to move. And somewhere deep in her chest a spark of power stirred, responding to her first taste of freedom in nearly 2 decades. The rogue Alpha watched her carefully, noting every tremor, every shiver of fear and hope. He knew the road ahead would be treacherous, not only for Elara, but for himself. Yet he did not hesitate.
Some instincts, some calls of fate could not be denied.
We should move, he said quietly, his gaze scanning the mist-shrouded forest.
Bert.
The queen will not let you go so easily, and the world beyond this kingdom is far darker than you can imagine.
Inspiration. But perhaps it is where you are meant to find your true self.
Elora rose, brushing the dirt from her torn clothes.
Her knees ached, her wrists were sore, but she no longer felt weak. Something had changed, something inside her that had been silent for 17 years. Inspiration. She did not know what it was yet, but she felt it awaken. As they walked deeper into the forest, shadows lengthening around them, Elara could not help but glance at her companion. There was danger in him, yes, but also a strange sense of safety. Perhaps it was because he understood what it meant to be hunted, to be feared. Perhaps it was because, unlike anyone she had known, he recognized the fire within her, even when it was hidden. And for the first time in her life, Elara did not feel like a slave. She felt like the beginning of something far greater, something that could challenge kings and queens, curses and chains alike. But even as she dared to hope, a part of her whispered that this was only the beginning. The road ahead would be filled with trials, with darkness that could consume them both. And the rogue alpha who had saved her held secrets of his own, secrets that could either protect her or destroy her. The forest closed around them, mist curling like ghostly fingers. And the first chapter of their journey had begun. The pyre was behind her, the dawn before her, and a world of uncertainty stretched endlessly into the horizon. Elara walked forward, and for the first time, she walked as more than a slave. She walked as a survivor. And perhaps one day she would walk as a queen of her own fate. The forest stretched endlessly before them, a dense maze of ancient trees and mist that twisted like silent serpents.
Every step Elara took seemed to pull her deeper into a world she had never known, wild, untamed, and dangerous.
The rogue alpha, KL, moved beside her with a grace that seemed almost unreal, alert to every sound.
His presence was both comforting and intimidating, a reminder that survival in this place required not just strength, but instinct. Alara's wrists, though freed from chains, still bore faint scars that burned when the wind kissed them. She flexed her fingers as if testing herself against the lingering memory of captivity. 17 years of obedience had tried to break her, yet somehow she had endured. And now, with Kale by her side, she felt a strange combination of fear and anticipation. "You must learn to move quietly," Kale said, his voice low and steady.
Every sound you make can draw attention. The kingdom's hunters are fast, and their magic sharper than steel.
I've never been in a place like this, she admitted. I don't even know what I can do.
KL glanced at her, his eyes narrowing slightly. Then you will learn.
You have a power inside you, Elara, whether you believe it or not. And in this forest, strength is not just measured by muscle. It is measured by control, by understanding, by heart. They walked in silence for a while, the mist curling around their feet, the sound of distant streams mixing with the whisper of wind through leaves. Elara felt an odd sense of freedom in this quiet, a freedom she had never known. And yet there was an edge of danger she could not ignore. Every rustle of a branch, every snap of a twig made her jump. "Why me?" she asked suddenly, breaking the quiet. "Why did you save me?" "You could have left me to die at the pyre." Giles' gaze remained fixed on the path ahead. "Because I saw something in you," he said carefully. Something no one else did. You are not just a pawn of the queen. You are more, and the world needs more than pawns. Bruh. Elara felt her chest tighten. No one had ever looked at her like that. Not as a human being, not as someone capable of power. Brit. All her life she had been treated as less than nothing. And yet here in the misty forest she felt recognized, almost valued. Inspiration. For hours they moved, navigating winding paths and hidden clearings. Kyle taught her the subtle ways of the forest, how to listen for danger, how to read the movement of animals, and how to recognize signs of magic lingering in the shadows. Slowly, Elara began to sense something stirring within herself, a faint pulse of energy she had long suppressed. When she focused on it, the mist around her seemed to shimmer slightly, as if responding to her presence. You feel that? Kale asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elara hesitated. I think so. It's like warmth, but also power. I don't know what it is. That is your gift, he said, his eyes darkening. Berhade.
It has been hidden for too long, buried under fear and chains, but it is real.
Dare. And if you learn to control it, you will not be afraid of anyone or anything. The words filled her with a strange hope, but also a heavier fear. Power had always been dangerous in her world. Those who wielded it were hunted, controlled, or destroyed. And now that she had glimpsed it, she realized how fragile her survival truly was. As night fell, they reached a small clearing where a stream sparkled under the moonlight. Kale stopped and gestured to the ground. Rest here. Inspiration. We will move again before dawn. Elara sank to the earth, shivering. The exhaustion of her escape, combined with the adrenaline of survival, weighed heavily on her. Inspiration. Kael watched her silently, his posture relaxed but alert, as if he were guarding not just her body, but the fragile flame of hope within her. You trust me? He asked, softly after a while. Pray. Elara looked at him, her eyes reflecting the silver of the moon. I think I do, she admitted. But I've never trusted anyone.
Kale's lips curved into the faintest smile.
Trust is not easy, but it is necessary. Especially in a world like this.
The night deepened and the forest seemed to hum with life.
Elara lay back on the soft earth, staring at the stars filtering through the branches. She felt strange emotions rising within her. Fear, hope, curiosity, and something else she could not name. Kale's presence was a constant shadow beside her, but it was a shadow that promised protection rather than threat. As she drifted into a light sleep, a whisper of the wind carried a warning. Somewhere in the forest, eyes watched them, silent, patient, and hungry. The kingdom's hunters were not far behind, and dark forces lingered in the places even Kael dared not tread. The next day, Kael pushed her further, teaching her how to move silently and observe carefully. He had her practice controlling her small bursts of power, encouraging her to test it against simple obstacles. A fallen tree became a barrier she could lift slightly with her energy, and a cluster of rocks responded to her will, shifting just enough to create a path. Elara felt exhilarated, but also exhausted.
The more she learned, the more she realized how little she knew of herself, and how dangerous the world truly was. "You are progressing faster than I expected," Kale said, watching her eyes flare with concentration. Brr.
But be careful. Power without control can be as dangerous to you as it is to your enemies.
Brr.
Elora nodded, though her mind was racing. She could feel the pull of something deeper, something ancient, tied to her bloodline.
Bird. And though Kale warned her of danger, she could not help but wonder if embracing that power was the key not just to survival, but to freedom. That evening, they made camp in a hollow beneath a twisted oak. Breath. Kale built a fire, its flames dancing and casting long shadows across the clearing. He handed her a small piece of bread and water, and for a moment they ate in silence, the forest holding its breath around them. Brr.
Elara,
Cal began quietly, his voice carrying a rare softness.
I know you've suffered. I know what it is to be controlled, to be hunted, to have no choice.
But you are not alone anymore. Whatever comes next, Brr, we face it together. Inspiration. She looked at him, the moonlight highlighting the sharp lines of his face, the storm in his eyes tempered by care. For a long time, she said nothing. Inspiration. Words felt fragile compared to the weight of trust and hope she had just begun to feel. Finally, she whispered, I don't know if I can, but I will try. Kale nodded, accepting her words without pressing further. Sometimes survival required patience, teaching, and guidance, not force. And he had already seen the fire in her, the kind of fire that could not be extinguished by chains or fear. But even as they rested, danger loomed closer. Hidden among the trees, shapes moved silently, barely perceptible. The Queen's enforcers were skilled, and magic ran through them like venom. They had tracked Elara from the moment she escaped the pyre, and now they closed in, patient as predators. The night air grew colder, the mist thicker, and a sense of unease settled over the clearing.
Elara could feel it too, a ripple of warning beneath her skin.
Her pulse quickened, and she instinctively reached for the strange warmth she had felt awakening in her body. It responded faintly, a whisper of energy that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. Brace show. Kale's hand rested lightly on her shoulder. Stay calm, he whispered. Inspiration. You will need your mind and your power. Trust yourself. The forest seemed to shift around them, shadows stretching unnaturally, trees bending as if alive. Brr.
Elara felt a thrill of fear and anticipation, the kind that told her the world was bigger and darker than she had ever imagined. And in that moment, she realized something terrifying and exhilarating. She was no longer just running from death.
She was running toward her own destiny. As the first hints of dawn touched the sky, Kale stood and scanned the horizon. They're coming, he murmured. Prepare yourself. This is only the beginning. Elara's heart pounded, but she no longer felt helpless. She could feel the stirrings of power within her, faint but insistent, like a heartbeat echoing through the forest. And though the road ahead was uncertain, though shadows loomed and danger pressed close, she understood one thing clearly. She would no longer be a victim. With Kale at her side, guiding, teaching, and protecting her, she had a chance to stand, to fight, and perhaps to claim the life that had been stolen from her. And somewhere deep in the forest, hidden eyes watched, waiting for the moment to strike, or to be surprised by the power that was awakening in the girl once sentenced to burn. The journey into the shadows had begun, and neither Alara nor Kale would ever be the same again. The forest no longer felt safe. Shadows stretched longer than they should, and the mist seemed thicker, curling around Alara like ghostly fingers. Burst. Every step forward was heavy with tension. She had learned to move silently, to listen to the rustle of leaves and the snap of twigs. But still, something deep in her chest warned her. The kingdom's hunters were closing in, and their magic was stronger than any blade. Barish. Kale moved beside her, eyes sharp and alert. He had taught her so much, how to sense energy, how to read the patterns of the forest, and how to summon small bursts of her hidden power. Yet he also reminded her constantly, power without control could be dangerous. Alara had begun to feel it stirring more often now, like a heartbeat pulsing beneath her skin. Brr. She could lift small objects, shift stones, even make the mist swirl at her command. It was intoxicating and terrifying. Brr. Stay close, Kale said, his voice low and firm. They are near. Inspiration. I can feel it. Elara's palms were damp with sweat. Her breath quickened. Brr. The hunter's presence was like a shadow pressing down, and she could almost hear whispers of magic carried on the wind. The queen's enforcers were skilled, their senses heightened by the same cursed bloodline that had marked her for death. Every instinct screamed at her to run, yet Kale's calm, commanding presence steadied her. Bray.
How will we fight then? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kale's eyes, stormy and unreadable, flicked toward her.
Inspiration.
We don't fight like soldiers. We fight like ghosts.
We use what they cannot see, what they do not understand. Your power, our bond, will give us an edge. Inspiration.
But you must trust yourself, Elara. Trust what you can do.
Elara nodded, though her heart pounded. Trust was not easy, especially with someone who held so much authority over her life. Inspiration. Yet there was something in Kale, a consistency, a protection that made it possible. And perhaps, she realized, the journey had changed them both. She was no longer just the girl who had been chained for 17 years. She was becoming someone stronger, someone capable of more than survival. Raret.
Hours passed, the forest twisting and turning around them. Kale led her to a hidden clearing, a small place of refuge where they could rest and prepare.
Brr. The moonlight filtered through the leaves, casting silver streaks across the ground. Here, Kale allowed her a brief moment to sit, to gather her strength. Inspiration.
You are progressing faster than I expected, he said. But the real challenge is coming.
Brr. You will face fear you cannot imagine, and you may be tempted to doubt yourself. Do not. Brr. The moment you doubt, you are lost. Elara swallowed hard. Inspiration. I will try, she whispered. Bray. I will not fail. Kale's gaze softened for a fleeting moment. Good. But remember, it is not about never failing. It is about standing again when you do. A sudden movement in the trees snapped her attention. Figures emerged, silent, precise, like shadows stepping into the moonlight. The queen's hunters had found them. Kale was already moving, a blur of motion, positioning himself between Elara and the approaching danger. His voice was calm but sharp. Remember your lessons. Use your power. Focus. Elara closed her eyes, letting the pulse of energy beneath her skin rise. She could feel it, responding to her fear, her determination, her will. Inspiration. She stretched out her hands, and the mist around the clearing stirred, twisting into shapes that blocked the hunter's path. The first struck, and the mist tightened, disorienting them, slowing their approach. Burst. Kale moved with lethal precision, deflecting attacks and using his own power to manipulate shadows. Elara watched him, awe mixed with determination. Inspiration. She could feel the rhythm of battle, the flow of energy around her, and for the first time, she felt not fear, but control. Hours seemed to pass in moments. The forest echoed with sounds of struggle, but finally the hunters retreated, confused and defeated. Elara sank to the ground, breathless and trembling. Kale knelt beside her. "You did well," he said quietly. "Better than I could have expected for your first encounter. You are stronger than you know." Inspiration. Elara's chest rose and fell rapidly. It felt different. "I wasn't scared," she admitted, a faint smile forming despite the exhaustion. Inspiration. "I felt powerful." Kale's eyes held a mixture of approval and caution. Power is not just strength. It is responsibility. And sometimes it is a burden.
You will learn that soon enough. The night passed. Quiet now, but tension lingered in the air.
Inspiration. Elara could not shake the feeling that the kingdom would not rest until they were captured or destroyed.
And Kale.
Kale carried secrets in his eyes, shadows of pain and betrayal that he did not share. Yet, in the silence, she began to sense his trust, a bond forming between them that was stronger than fear. The following days brought more lessons and challenges. Kale taught her to sense danger before it arrived, to focus her power even in moments of panic, and to trust her instincts. Each night they camped under the canopy of trees, sharing stories of the past, fragments of lives lost and endured.
Elara learned of Kale's past. The betrayals, the exile, the reasons he became a rogue alpha feared by both kingdoms and rogues alike. Yet he never spoke of his emotions, never allowed himself to show vulnerability.
Elara, despite her own scars, felt drawn to him. She respected his strength, feared his temper, and slowly something else grew, a fragile thread of connection that neither dared to name. One night as they rested by a stream, Elara dared to speak.
Kale! Why do you help me?
Why risk yourself for someone you barely know? Kyle's gaze met hers, steady and unreadable. Because sometimes the world chooses people for each other. Inspiration. And sometimes survival is not just about strength. It is about who you stand beside. Elara nodded, though her heart fluttered with questions she could not voice. There was something in his words, a promise, but also a warning. His past was dark, and danger followed him as surely as it followed her. The days of travel and training were not without peril. Elara discovered more of her own abilities. She could move small objects, shift shadows, even sense emotions around her. Inspiration. Yet each success came with a cost: exhaustion, fear, and the constant reminder that her power alone would not be enough. Kale's guidance remained crucial, and their bond deepened with each shared challenge. One evening as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of red and gold, they reached a cliff overlooking the kingdom. The view was breathtaking, but Elara's heart ached at the sight of the city below, the place where she had been enslaved, the place that had tried to burn her alive. "They will not stop," she said quietly. "The Queen, she will send more. Always more." Kale's eyes were dark, filled with shadows of past battles. Then
be ready, he said firmly. You must learn to fight with strategy, with understanding, with heart, and above all, you must trust yourself. Breaths. Elara swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She was no longer just a survivor. She was becoming something more. Someone who could face the kingdom, who could confront the curses of her bloodline, and perhaps even change the fate of those around her. As they descended from the cliff and prepared for the night, a strange tension hung in the air. The forest whispered, shadows danced, and somewhere beyond the trees, unseen eyes watched them with patience and hunger. The Queen's enforcers were not done. Their next attack would not be a simple chase. It would be calculated, precise, and deadly. Elara felt a surge of determination. She could no longer run from her past, from her destiny, or from the dangers that hunted her. She had survived the pyre, escaped the kingdom, and begun to awaken the power within herself. Now she would face the trials ahead with courage, and with Kale at her side she would discover the full extent of what she could become. But as the night deepened, Kale's expression darkened. Barrett. He knew that the next encounter would test not just Elara's strength, but their bond, their trust, and their very survival. And in the shadows of the forest he sensed a force that was both familiar and terrifying, a remnant of the kingdom's darkest magic, coming for them with intent that was far more personal than mere capture. Elara lay beside the fire, her hands resting lightly on the ground, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath her. The warmth of the fire, the cool night air, and the presence of Kale beside her gave her a strange sense of calm. Yet, the whispers of danger never fully left her mind. She was learning, growing, awakening, but the kingdom's shadow stretched long, and the road ahead was fraught with peril. And somewhere in the distance, unseen, the wheels of fate turned. The hunters would strike again. Elara's power would be tested, and Kale's secrets, the ones he kept tightly locked, the ones that could either save or doom them, would soon surface. The forest held its breath, waiting for the inevitable clash, and Elara, for the first time, felt ready. The first rays of dawn stretched over the forest, filtering through the mist in long silver beams. Elara stood on the edge of a hill, the valley below cloaked in shadows, yet alive with movement. The Queen's forces were coming, more numerous and cunning than ever. She could see their banners dark and sharp against the soft morning light and feel the pulse of magic that swirled like a storm around them. Kale stood beside her, his presence steady and commanding. His dark eyes scanned the approaching army, his jaw set in grim determination. They have brought everything, he said softly. But we are ready.
Elara's heart pounded in her chest.
For weeks, she had trained, learned, and awakened to the power she had never known. She could now summon energy, bend shadows, and sense emotions in ways that had once terrified her. But today, everything would be tested. Not just her power, but her courage, her trust, and the bond she shared with Kale.
I'm ready, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Kale placed a hand lightly on her shoulder.
I know you are, but remember, strength alone will not win this.
You must fight with your mind, your heart, and your will.
The Queen's soldiers marched forward, their eyes fixed on the forest's edge. Enchanters carried glowing staffs, their spells ready to bind or destroy. And in the midst of the army, a familiar figure moved with unnatural grace. The Queen's personal emissary, a master of both strategy and magic, sent to ensure that Elara would not survive. Elara felt a surge of fear, but it was tempered by determination. She could not allow herself to hesitate. She was no longer a slave,
no longer powerless. She took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of energy beneath her skin, and let it flow outward. The mist around the hill began to twist, coiling and shimmering as if alive. Brr. Stones trembled, leaves fluttered, and the air hummed with a strange, vibrant power. Kale moved beside her, drawing shadows toward them like a protective shield. Inspiration.
Stay with me, he said. We face them together. The first wave of soldiers reached the forest's edge.
Elara raised her hands, and a gust of wind infused with her energy swept forward, knocking back the front ranks. The soldiers stumbled, surprised by the sudden force, and the enchanters hissed in frustration. Kale struck with precision, using his own powers to manipulate the shadows and energy around them. Together they were a stormlight, and darkness moving as one, coordinated and unstoppable. Elara felt a thrill unlike anything she had ever known. For the first time, she was not just defending herself. She was fighting for freedom, for life, and for the right to exist on her own terms. Hours seemed to pass in a blur of motion, magic, and strategy. Soldiers fell back. The Queen's emissary struck again and again, and yet Elara and Kale held their ground. The forest itself seemed to respond to her, the trees bending subtly, the wind whispering guidance as if the land recognized her power and claimed her as its own. Inspiration. But even as victory seemed near, a shadow of doubt crept into Alara's mind. She had learned to trust herself. But could she trust Kale completely? He had been her guide, her protector, yet he carried secrets she did not understand.
Could she rely on him when the final confrontation came?
The emissary moved forward, directly toward her. Magic crackled in the air, a deadly energy that threatened to consume everything in its path.
Elara felt her pulse quicken, the energy inside her rising in response.
Brr. She raised her hands and released a wave of power that surged toward the emissary. The force struck with precision, yet the enemy countered, deflecting it with a shield of glowing energy. Inspiration.
Kale's voice cut through the chaos. Focus, Elara. Trust your instincts!
She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, feeling the rhythm of her power. It was no longer a whisper, no longer a faint pulse. Inspiration.
It was alive, vibrant, and responding to her will. When she opened her eyes, the emissary froze, caught in a moment of disbelief.
Then, with a wave of her hands, the ground beneath them shifted, roots and stones rising to hold the enemy in place. Kale seized the moment, striking with speed and precision. The emissary fell back, disoriented but alive. Elara felt a surge of triumph, but it was short-lived. Beyond the first wave, more soldiers advanced, and the Queen herself emerged from the shadows, her presence commanding and powerful, her eyes fixed on Elara with a mixture of rage and fascination.
Breath. You were never meant to survive, the Queen said, her voice sharp and cold. You belong to my bloodline curse, and that is your fate. Alara's pulse quickened, yet she felt no fear.
Not now. Not after everything she had endured.
She raised her hands, and the mist, the wind, the very earth seemed to respond.
I am not yours, she said, her voice steady.
I am mine!
The Queen's magic collided with hers, a storm of light and shadow that shook the ground. Elara could feel the strain, the exhaustion, but she refused to falter. She was no longer a child chained to fear. She was a woman awakened, a force of nature, and she would not be broken. Kale moved beside her, shadows swirling around him as he added his own strength to the fight. Together they pushed back the Queen, their combined power a testament to trust, courage, and determination. The battle raged, but slowly, Step by step, the queen's forces began to falter. Soldiers fled, enchanters were overcome, and the queen herself struggled against the combined might of Kale and Alara. Finally, with one last surge of power, Alara released a wave that illuminated the valley, forcing the queen to retreat. The forest settled, the mist drifting like smoke in the calm morning air.
Brr. Elara sank to the ground, exhausted, her heart racing, yet filled with triumph. Kale knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder.
You did it, he said quietly, pride and relief in his voice. You were magnificent.
We did it, she corrected. Together. For the first time in her life, she felt not only free but powerful. The chains of the past, the fear, the oppression, they were gone, replaced by trust, courage, and the knowledge that she could shape her own destiny.
Kale studied her quietly, his stormy eyes softening.
He had seen many battles, many struggles, but nothing compared to the transformation he had witnessed in her. She was no longer the girl chained for 17 years, Bert. She was a woman who had faced fire, darkness, and fear, and emerged stronger, wiser, and fully alive. The valley was quiet now, the only sounds the rustle of leaves and the distant cry of birds. The queen had retreated, her forces scattered, but Alara knew this was only a beginning. The kingdom would recover, secrets would resurface, and new challenges would come. Yet she was no longer afraid. She had power, courage, and allies. And most importantly, she had Kael, whose past was dark but whose loyalty had proven unbreakable. They walked together back into the forest, the sunlight breaking through the mist. Alara felt the wind on her face, the earth beneath her feet, and the pulse of energy within her. She was alive in a way she had never been before, and she knew that whatever came next, she could face it. For Kael, the battle had been more than survival. He had learned to trust, to hope, and to see that even the darkest past could give rise to something extraordinary. In Alara, he had found not just a companion in battle, but a partner, an equal, and perhaps, in time, something deeper. The forest stretched before them, a world of endless possibilities. And though danger would always lurk in shadows, Alara no longer feared it. She had survived fire, awakened her power, and claimed her freedom. The chains were gone, the curse broken, not through vengeance, but through courage, trust, and heart.
As they paused on a ridge overlooking the valley, Kale spoke softly. This is only the beginning, Alara.
The world is vast, and your journey is just starting. But know this, you are ready for whatever comes next.
Alara nodded, feeling a surge of strength and hope. I am, she said.
And I will not be afraid. The sun rose fully now, golden light spilling across the forest and the valley below. The mist began to lift, revealing a land renewed, full of promise. Alara and Kale stood side by side, their bond stronger than any magic, their hearts aligned in determination and trust. They had faced death, darkness, and betrayal. They had confronted fear, learned to wield power, and discovered the strength within themselves. And now, together, they would face the future, not as slaves, not as victims, but as masters of their own destiny. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the promise of change, of freedom, and of new beginnings. And in that moment, Alara knew that she was no longer a shadow of her past. She was a force of nature, a spark of light and power, and the world would never forget her.